June 2004. A man walks into a negotiation room with a piece of blue cardboard. On it, a name. Blue Goose. No product, no liquid, no factory. Just a name on cardboard. 3 days later, a multinational corporation wires him $2.2 billion in cash. Cash. Not stock. Not a deal with conditions. Hard cash. And here's the part that should bother you. That corporation, one of the biggest spirits companies on the planet, knew it was buying an illusion. They just didn't know the illusion would eventually eat them alive. By the end of this video, you'll understand 3 things. 1. How a bottle of vodka that costs less than $4 to produce sells for $30 at retail. 2. How the system behind that trick was handed to a corporate giant, and how that giant broke the very machine it paid billions to own. And 3, why the same trap is running on entire industries right now, in categories you shop every single week. If you think you've already heard the Grey Goose story, you haven't. Not this version. Let's go back to where it really begins. Not 1997, not the launch, earlier. 1976, America. A liquor salesman named Sidney Frank is 46 years old, moving low-margin German liqueurs nobody asks for. He has no hit product, no legacy brand, no venture capital. What he has is one skill that almost nobody teaches in business school. He can read what people want to believe about themselves. He files that skill away. Fast forward 20 years, 1996. The American consumer has changed completely. They're not just buying products anymore, they're buying signals. Signals that say, I made it, I have taste, I am not ordinary. Cars do it, watches do it, coffee does it. Starbucks charges $4 for something that costs 40 cents. And Sidney Frank stares at the vodka shelf and sees a gap so obvious it physically hurts. Vodka. By federal law, actual law must be a neutral spirit. That means it cannot have a distinctive taste, cannot have a distinctive smell. It is literally required by regulation to taste like nothing. And yet nobody is selling it as luxury. Nobody is charging $30 for tasteless liquid and wrapping it in a story so beautiful that your brain fills in the flavor. Nobody except Sidney Frank, starting right now. Here's where this story gets dark, and I mean economically dark. Sidney doesn't invent a product, he engineers a belief system. France is the first tool. France doesn't make vodka, never has. Russia makes vodka, Poland makes vodka. France makes champagne, Chanel, and 3-star Michelin meals. Sidney knows that if you stamp product of France on a bottle of neutral spirit, something automatic happens in the human brain. The brain doesn't ask questions, it pattern matches. France equals luxury. Therefore, this equals luxury. The second tool is price. Not price as a result of cost. Price as an argument. $30 when everything else on the shelf sits between $10 and $17. That gap, that $13 gap, is not a price. It is a statement. It says, everything below me is ordinary. Here's how that works in your brain. It's called price anchoring. Imagine you walk into a watch shop. The first watch they show you is $10,000. Suddenly, a $2,000 watch feels reasonable, almost like a bargain. Your brain uses the first number it sees as a ruler for everything that follows. Sidney set his bottle as the ruler, everything else measured against Grey Goose. The third tool is what nobody talks about, and this is where it gets truly ugly. Sidney paid bartenders directly. Cash bonuses for every time a customer asked, "What's good?" and the bartender answered, "Grey Goose." Not a suggestion, a paid recommendation wearing the face of expert advice. You trust the person behind the bar. They know drinks. They have no reason to lie, except they do, and it's sitting in their wallet. That's not marketing. That's manufactured trust. And it worked at industrial scale. By 1998, Grey Goose enters a trade competition, the Beverage Testing Institute, and scores well. Sidney's team plasters that result everywhere. Wall Street Journal ads, nightclub promotions, bar menus. Suddenly, Grey Goose is not just expensive, it's award-winning, official, validated. Here is the small print nobody read. Belvedere Vodka, a direct competitor, later took Sidney Frank to court. The lawsuit accused Grey Goose of false and misleading advertising. The National Advertising Review Board concluded the #1 tasting vodka claim was inaccurate. The ruling called it misleading. But here's the thing about rulings. They come after the damage. By the time regulators moved, Grey Goose had already colonized the American subconscious. The correction never travels as fast as the original lie. And then something happened that no human being could have planned. September 2000, HBO. A character sits at a bar, orders a Cosmopolitan, and says 4 words nobody was paid to write. Make it Grey Goose. New York bars reported visible spikes in Grey Goose orders within days. Not weeks, days. One scripted line on a fictional television show did what $20 million in print advertising could not. It made Grey Goose feel like a social fact, not a product choice, a cultural reflex. By 2003, Grey Goose controls over 85% of the entire super premium vodka category in the United States, a category, let that sink in, that did not exist until Sidney Frank built it from nothing. He didn't enter a market, he invented one, then monopolized it. June 2004, Sidney is 84 years old. Bacardi, owner of rum, gin, whiskey, tequila, wants Grey Goose badly. They're losing ground in vodka. Their own premium vodka brand, Turi, has less than 1% market share. Grey Goose has everything Bacardi doesn't. Cultural heat, prestige positioning, bartender loyalty, celebrity association. Bacardi offers to negotiate on price. Sidney doesn't negotiate. He slides the blue cardboard across the table. Blue Goose. Same prestige positioning, aimed directly at Bombay Sapphire, Bacardi's most valuable gin asset, their crown jewel. Within 72 hours, trademark filings for Blue Goose appear in industry publications. Distributors start asking about pre-orders for a product that does not physically exist. The bluff works. Bacardi wires $2.2 billion cash. And here is where the story changes completely, because nobody tells you what happens next. Bacardi believed they were buying a machine, a premium vodka machine. Input, French liquid, frosted glass, smart placement. Output, infinite prestige, infinite margin. What they actually bought was a moment, a cultural moment that was already tied to a specific era, a specific human, Sidney Frank, and a specific cultural tension that was already beginning to shift. The machine worked because Sidney personally managed every piece of it. He knew which bartender to call, which club mattered on which night, which celebrity would carry the bottle naturally versus which one would look like a paid post. Bacardi didn't have that. Bacardi had committees. Bacardi had global brand guidelines. Bacardi had quarterly targets. They took the thing that made Grey Goose feel real, the human architecture behind the illusion, and replaced it with corporate processes. And while Bacardi optimized, something was growing in a shed in Austin, Texas. His name was Tito Beveridge. Yes, that is his actual legal name. Tito made vodka by hand, in a pot still, the kind normally used for whiskey, not vodka. He had no French heritage, no wooden crates, no frosted glass, no award plaques. He priced it low. He called it handmade. He marketed it as the opposite of Grey Goose. And slowly, then suddenly, consumers who had been trained by Grey Goose to value premium started switching. Not because Tito's was cheaper, because Tito's told a different story. The underdog, the Texan craftsman, authentic, local, real. By 2021, Tito's handmade vodka was the best-selling spirit in the United States. Not best-selling vodka, best-selling spirit. All categories. Beer, whiskey, rum, everything. The brand that had been sold for $2.2 billion was being beaten by a man in a shed with a different psychological story. And here is the uncomfortable truth that the spirits industry does not want to say out loud. Bacardi didn't just overpay for a vodka brand. They overpaid for a story. A story with a limited shelf life. Because stories don't age the way buildings do. Stories need to match the cultural moment. And by the early 2000s, the cultural moment had moved. The aspirational trigger was no longer luxury French. It was authentic American, craft, real. Grey Goose missed the shift, because Grey Goose was now run by people who understood cost centers and distribution networks, not psychology. Meanwhile, the vodka shelf had been permanently repriced. Grey Goose's true legacy wasn't the brand itself. It was the category it manufactured, a category where consumers had been conditioned, deeply conditioned, to distrust anything below $25. Same liquid, different label. Your brain picks the expensive one every single time. Think about what that means for every bottle sitting on that shelf. Those competitors charging $30, $40, $50, they're not competing on taste. Vodka is legally neutral. Taste is irrelevant. They are competing on narrative distance from Grey Goose, on how effectively they borrow Grey Goose's logic and apply it to their own story. The illusion Sidney Frank built didn't die when he sold the brand. It metastasized. It became the operating system for an entire category. And here is where this stops being a vodka story. Your gym supplements in the clinical-looking packaging. The airline calling 12 inches of extra legroom business class. The water brand charging $7 for Mountain Spring hydration. The business school charging $80,000 for connections you could have bought for a fraction of the price. Every single one of them learned the same lesson Sidney Frank learned in 1996. Price is not evidence of quality. Price is a story about quality. And once you believe the story, once it gets past your conscious filter, your brain rewrites the experience to match. Not metaphorically, neurologically. The pleasure center actually responds differently when you believe you're consuming something premium. This was documented in a 2008 California Institute of Technology study. Participants tasted the same wine from two bottles, one labeled $5, one labeled $45. Brain scans showed measurably higher activity in the medial orbitofrontal cortex, the region associated with experienced pleasantness when people thought they were drinking the expensive wine. Same liquid, different number, different brain response. Grey Goose didn't sell vodka. Grey Goose sold a neurological upgrade. And Bacardi, a 200-year-old company, paid $2.2 billion for the patent. So the next time you're standing at a bar, a shelf, or a checkout page, and something is priced 20, 30, 50% above everything else, pause. One question. Just one. Are you paying for what's in the bottle, or are you paying for what the bottle tells you about?